If you're pouring your heart into your podcast, but still struggling to turn those listeners into paying clients, I've got something just for you. Imagine having a clear, simple plan to turn your listeners into buyers without relying on a huge audience or spending hours on social media. That's exactly what we'll create together in a podcast profit plan discovery call. During this free 20-minute call, I'll help you discover more opportunities for profit in your podcast and give you the next best step to turn your show into a client attracting machine. If I've got an offer that will help you expedite this process, then we can also discuss working together. Book your free podcast profit plan discovery call now by going to podcastingformoms.co/profit plan or by clicking the link in the show notes. I can't wait to chat with you. So let me say something that might sting a little bit. Your podcast might not have a growth problem. It might just have a messaging problem. And the tricky part is that most podcasters don't even realize it. Let's talk about it. Welcome to Podcasting for Moms, the show for moms in business ready to start, grow, and scale a podcast that turns their listeners into buyers. I'm Jenny Soneson, a podcast strategist and fellow mom entrepreneur. You're in the right place if you want to learn how to start and grow a podcast that attracts your ideal clients and really does the heavy lifting for you when it comes to selling your offers, all while balancing life as a busy mom. Are you ready to create a podcast that grows your income, impact, and influence? Let's make podcasting work for you because as moms, we know how to get things done. All right, let's jump into the episode. Hey, and welcome to Podcasting for Moms, the podcast where we simplify podcasting so that it actually fits into your life and helps you grow your business. And today we're talking about something that is holding back so many podcasts, even the ones that are consistent, even the ones with good content, and even the ones that are technically doing everything right. And that is your messaging. Because if your podcast isn't growing, if it's not converting, and if it feels like you're putting in effort without seeing any results, then there's a good chance that this is a missing piece. So here is what most podcasters think. They think if I just post more episodes, if I just stay consistent, or if I improve my editing or my mic quality, then things will click. But here's the truth. You can have the most consistent podcast in the world and still not grow because growth doesn't come from more content. It comes from clear, compelling messaging. And most podcasts, they're way too vague. So let's talk about what a messaging problem actually means. So when I say messaging, I don't mean your podcast cover art, your intro music, or even your episode titles, although those do matter as well. I mean this: how clearly your podcast communicates who it is for, what problem it solves, and why someone should keep listening. Because your listener is subconsciously asking, is this for me? Do I need this? And should I keep listening? And if your messaging doesn't answer those questions quickly, then they're going to just poof and be gone. So here's what it looks like in real life. So instead of I help moms grow their business, while that sounds nice, it's not specific. And it doesn't create connection or make someone feel seen. So now let's compare that to something that's more optimized. I help busy moms build a service-based business in 20 hours a week without burning out or sacrificing time with their kids. Now we're talking. That's clear, that's specific, and that makes the right person go, oh, wait, that is exactly what I need. And your podcast should feel like that too. So let's talk about the 3 hidden messaging gaps. So the first gap is that you're trying to speak to everyone. And when your podcast is for everyone, it connects with no one. Specificity builds trust, while broad messaging just gets ignored. The second hidden messaging gap is that your content is helpful, but it's not anchored. So you're giving tips, you're sharing value, but your episodes feel disconnected from a bigger message. So your listener doesn't know what you really stand for or why they should keep coming back for more. And the third gap is that you're not positioning your podcast as a solution. So a lot of podcasts sound like, here are some ideas, hope this helps, instead of this is the problem that I solve, and this podcast is part of that solution. And that one shift changes everything. So here's how to fix it without starting over. You do not need to rebrand your podcast. You don't need to start from scratch. You just need to tighten your messaging. So here is where I'd start. I want you to get crystal clear on who your podcast is for. Dive really deep into that. Then I want you to define the core problem that your podcast solves. And then you want to make sure every single episode on your show ties back to that. And especially, you want to start saying the same thing more often. And not to be like repetitive, but you want to reinforce, because clarity doesn't come from saying more things. It comes from saying the right things or the right thing consistently. And at the end of the day, your podcast isn't just content. It's communication, it's positioning, and it's truly an extension of your business. And when your messaging is clear, growth is going to get easier, content gets simpler, and your podcast actually starts working for you. So if you've been feeling like I'm doing everything right, but something is still not clicking, then this might be it. And if you want help figuring out where your messaging is off, that is exactly what I do inside of my podcast growth audit. We take a look at your show as a whole, your messaging, positioning, content, and identify what is actually holding you back. So if you want to check out the podcast growth audit, you can head to podcastingformoms.co/audit. Once again, that is podcastingformoms.co/audit. And if this episode hit home for you, I want you to send it to a fellow podcaster who might need to hear this too, because the chances are they are probably dealing with the same hidden problem that you are. All right, that is it for today's episode. I will see you guys in the next episode. Thank you for tuning into Podcasting for Moms. I hope today's episode gave you the tools and inspiration you need to make your podcast work smarter, not harder. If you love what you heard, be sure to subscribe and leave a review. It means the world and helps other moms in business find the show. For more tips, resources, and support, head to podcastingformoms.co. Remember, you're not just building a podcast, you're building your legacy. Until next time, friends.